Okay, we are now broadcasting,
Oh,
Allison.
great.
Just 12 now, so let's just give a couple seconds while we wait for everyone to come online. And I will get my screen shared.
Okay, sounds good. Wonderful.
Like I've shared appropriately.
Yes, it looks good.
Okay. And I will mute myself.
Thanks. Well, I'll start off just by saying hello to all. I'm Alison Green Myers. I'm the program director here at the Highlights Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a little bit about this webinar series. This is the third installment in our Finding the Right workshop for your 2020 writing goals. 2 weeks ago, our very first webinar in the series, we talked about 25 workshops for novelists. And then last Friday, we talked about 25 workshops for picture book authors and picture book author illustrators. Next week, if we jump ahead, we'll be talking about 10 workshops that we have specifically for our illustrator friends to join in on. So what's the word today? Well, today is more than one word. We're going to spend the next half hour talking about nonfiction, poetry, and the special area offerings that we will host here in 2020. Actually, in drafting today's webinar, I was surprised to see 8 offerings for poets, which surprise probably isn't the right word because my job is to craft these offerings. So I knew that they were there, but to see them all gathered together, all 8 of them, it was a happy reminder of the development we've had in the area of poetry as I was pulling together today's show. Friends of the foundation have asked more and more for poetry offerings, and we really listened. So we appreciate your feedback all the time, especially when it can help us in one of these special areas. It also might be, I confess, my downright love for all things poetry. If you know me, I can't get away from not sharing at least one poem during a meal when you're here on campus. You could give me days with Mary Oliver or Joy Harjo or Billy Collins or Nikki Grimes or Jane Yolen or any poet. I think poetry is a superpower as far as I'm concerned. It understands just word play and word usage in a way that helps us as writers and thinkers and readers. It really gives us space to think about the power of words and the power in the absence of words, in that white space that's on the page. But I'm getting too far ahead of myself. This is supposed to be a webinar about you picking your workshop for 2020, so I don't need to wax on about my love for poetry. We'll talk about poetry a little later in the webinar. In addition to the 8 wonderful poetry offerings we have, we'll also be talking today about 5 terrific nonfiction workshops for writers and 6 special area workshops that cover just a little bit of everything. At the Highlights Foundation, we pride ourselves on finding the just right faculty to help you on your journey in creating wonderful content for children. We have a team that we've gathered of passionate, informed, and inspired faculty, and they are 100% committed to providing you with a welcoming community, access to practical strategies for developing as a writer or illustrator, and really engaging you in the needed conversations of the children's industry today. With that in mind, let's talk about ways that you can find yourself here and to those faculty. My guess is that even attending today's webinar, you've already done some filtering of your needs. After all, you picked the webinar of all the ones that we've shown so far that centers on nonfiction, poetry, and these special areas. So let's dig just a little bit deeper. If you were sitting here with me today, I'd have you answer a few questions. I'd have you tell me in what genre or genres you're writing. I'd have you tell me where you are on your journey as an author or an author illustrator or an illustrator. I'd have you tell me where within your current project or projects you are. And finally, I'd ask you, how much feedback are you really ready to receive on the project that you're working on? And if you've listened in on our 2 other webinars, you probably have heard these questions. I think they're valuable, but you'll notice today with this special area, I've moved the genre question to be first. Let's first identify that area that you're writing within, and then we'll move on to the journey and on to the feedback question. And that's where we'll begin today. In what genre or genres are you writing? You may ask yourself all sorts of questions here and try and figure out what workshop might look best for you. Do you write nonfiction, or are you interested in weaving factual elements into your fiction? Do you write poetry, or are you interested in weaving poetic conventions into your next picture book manuscript? Do you write a little bit of everything? And so on, until you discover, yes, this is my area of interest. And then I would ask, where are you on your journey as an author or illustrator? And where are you really within your current project or projects? For example, you might say that you write a little bit of everything, but right now, your current project, you're focusing on a long-form biography about Gloria Steinem. You are thick in the research end of it, and you are looking for that spark, that beginning of a narrative arc that you will need to bring readers into the biography. We can definitely help with that. Or perhaps you might respond to this question by saying, I'm a classroom teacher and I see a need. I see a need for a very specific type of book, maybe something on meditation and yoga and its benefits in working with children, but you don't know where to begin putting pen to paper. We can help you start that writing process. So after you have a better understanding of where you are on your journey and any genres that you're really interested in learning about or you're currently writing in, you can start to see the pathways for yourself into professional development. And you can start to see what we have here as far as offerings. So one more filtering tool that I would say to use, aside from the genre and your journey, would be asking yourself, how much feedback are you really ready to receive? Each of our workshops has a component of feedback, some more than others. Some feedback is given in roundtable critiques with faculty and peers. Some is given as one-to-one conferences. It varies, but we try our best to lay out all of this information before you get here so you know exactly what to expect. When you check out our website and you look at a workshop description, you'll see that it identifies what you're expected to turn in, if there are pages that are to be reviewed ahead of time, and what the activity looks like for feedback when you're on campus. We know that feedback helps our craft, but it's also essential to growth within the children's publishing community. You're on a journey with the skill of writing, but you're also on a journey with the skill of giving and receiving feedback. So you need to ask yourself, how do you take critique? How do you process critique once it's given and then move forward into your project? Do you want a workshop where you have time to work on the revisions and still check in and show it to your reviewer after you've done some of the revisions? Or even, would too much feedback at this point in your writing process halt your momentum and keep you from finishing a draft? I was just working with a faculty team who will be here with us in March about the type of feedback that they were offering. We're getting ready to send out a welcome note, which is something you'll receive before you arrive on campus. And it gives very specific instructions as to what to expect that first night that you arrive, but then also what to expect within your critique and the submission guidelines for things that you'll be turning in. And so I was going back and forth with this faculty, and they were talking so much about how excited they are to have big blocks of roundtable critique offered. The thing about roundtable critique is that it is so beneficial, yes, as the writer who is getting multiple perspectives and multiple people talking through their work, but it's also very beneficial to the giver. It's beneficial to be able to review something and think and process questions that you have about someone else's work. It really helps to fill that skill as well. And so in talking with this faculty, we talked about, the excitement for having these roundtable critiques, but also that we were going to add a one-to-one component, and we were going to add it later in the schedule so that people had an opportunity to sit in roundtable, had an opportunity to do some revision, and then had their opportunity to do one-to-one feedback with the faculty, to talk about the planning of that revision, to talk about some of the things that they were able to digest in the roundtable critique. You'll see in a majority of our workshops, if there's roundtable critique, we also want to offer the one-to-one. I think there's so much benefit that you get from a roundtable critique as the reviewer and as the writer, but there is also that space, even if it's informal, where one-to-one you're kind of checking in on your needs moving forward. So when we think about critique and we think about this process of letting other people view our work, it's interesting because writing will always be a team event. You take a story so far, and then you have trusted readers and professionals who help you craft that story in the best possible way to get to your end goal, whatever that might be. So that third question is a big one because it's a big piece of a development in taking critique and making a plan to move on. So you need to decide, how much critique are you ready to hear? How equipped are you at processing the suggestions that are given? And how do you move forward once you have that information? So the good news is, here you are, you've answered all three of these questions, right? I know what genre I'm writing in or interested in. I know where I am in a project, and I know how much feedback that I'm ready to get. So now, today, let's talk about those nonfiction, poetry, and special area offerings that we have in 2020. Starting with nonfiction, we begin the year with our Telling It True, the Art of Storytelling in Narrative Nonfiction with Steve Shankin, Todd Olson, Paula Yu, and editor Connie Sue. This workshop offers lecture, discussion, roundtable critique, one-to-one feedback with the faculty. I wonder if you can tell which one I was talking about earlier. And sessions like Scene and Structure, Why Nonfiction Writers Should Think Like Screenwriters, or Outlining and Writing Process, My Step-by-Step Strategy. This workshop, specifically from Todd and Steve and Paula and Connie, has been crafted to really reflect the strengths of this form of nonfiction writing. We also have some experts in the long form nonfiction at our summer camp in nonfiction. On this year's nonfiction faculty, you'll learn from Don Tate and Lisa Klein-Ransom, Heidi Stempel, Dana Rao, Rob Sanders, and special guests Yvonne Dennis and Daniel Nahiri. Each one is well-versed in writing nonfiction for young readers. And the summer camp model is great. We have 3 summer camps, one in fiction, one in nonfiction, and one in illustration. They're great because the setup is the same. It's a morning keynote, daily mentor meetings, and then breakout sessions that are to your specific track. So if you're looking for something like long form nonfiction, that would be one of the tracks in the afternoon. Or if you're looking for picture book biography, that would be one of the tracks in the afternoon. This summer, we have sessions on just about everything from crafting a nonfiction book proposal to trimming your research until you find the gold to start your story. Summer camp is a great example of a workshop that offers critique for a writer looking for a lot of one-to-one feedback. You meet with your faculty mentor every day. You might work on one project with them, or you might look at a new project each day. That really is up to you, and that's up to your needs. But that's something that is offered at the summer camp in nonfiction. More nonfiction offerings include our Crafting Nonfiction Picture Books for a Changing World. This is a brand new workshop. It's with Tracy Sorrell and Cynthia Levinson. Vanessa Brantley Newton, Matali Perkins, and editor Candice Castan. It covers the craft of writing and researching stories about people, about places, about events that have changed or will change the world. It's brand new, and it comes from some people looking at what can we come to next after a biography workshop? What are some other areas that we can take a look at? So we're excited about this one in November. We also have our science and nature writing for kids and teens. This is a very popular workshop that we've had again and again. It's an intensive workshop that really emerges an author or an author illustrator or an illustrator in what it means to write in the STEAM category. This workshop has a special plus, really, I think, for science and nature enthusiasts, because in addition to the craft, there's a lot of focus on craft, but they really make use of our retreat center, that 1,300 beautiful acres of forest. There's hikes, there's bird watching, there's nature journaling, and many other outdoor activities. It really is a great workshop for people looking to write in, but also enjoy the science and nature aspects. The last offering that I'll talk about for our nonfiction writers, I don't think it's on the website yet, and if it is, it went up this morning in the wee hours. It is a special type of unworkshop retreat with Deborah Heiligman. Our unworkshops, for those of you who aren't familiar, they're popular because you as the book creator drive your schedule. We fill you with 3 meals a day, plenty of snacks, you have private accommodations, and you have room to really create and make headway on your work. You bring the project that you need to write, and then you go off and do it. But for this special unworkshop, Deb will be in attendance, and she'll be working on her own nonfiction project. And then she'll gather with the group to talk nonfiction talk and to troubleshoot problems that people might be having during the day. There'll be a chance for people to share, kind of like an open mic. And she'll also be a part of the discussions at meals. It's kind of like an unworkshop plus, if you will. You get all the beauty of the unworkshop itself, and then on top of that, you have an excellent nonfiction writer right there at your side with you throughout your experience. If we go back to those 3 questions that we started with, genre and journey and how much feedback you're ready to receive, this experience that I'm talking about with Deb is perfect for a nonfiction writer, so that would check the first one, who needs time and space to work on or revise a nonfiction project and is not looking for formal feedback, because that will not be offered. But maybe you are looking to spend 4 days with Deborah Heiligman, which would be great. For our poets who may write fiction or nonfiction or some kind of magic that they've created because they're poets, we have 8 workshops to discuss today. And we'll start with our poetry intensive. This intensive is just that. It's intense. It has 8 workshops. You workshop in the morning and in the afternoon of every single day that you are there. You learn, discuss, and craft poetry, and you're under the guidance of Gail Carson Levine. In addition to Gail's poetry intensive, another immersive experience for poets is our Craft and Heart of Poetry, where you learn about poetry collections and poetic picture books, as well as standalone poetry. And while the Craft and Heart of Poetry workshop is specific to children's authors, the Poetry Intensive doesn't just focus on children's poetry. It opens up from there as well. Both of them are really an immersive experience into poetry where you'll be generating a lot of work every day. A retreat style, though, poetry experience is our Working Poets Retreat, where most of the day is spent in the wonder of your own words. You gather and share and offer feedback in roundtable groups, and there are informal discussions about poetry and books. It is not a full workshop. It's, again, something that I might say it's an unworkshop with a little higher level of feedback because of those roundtable groups and those discussions. We do have a brand new experience for poets called Power Up Poetry. We're very excited about this one that will take poets through the skills needed to actually build and revise a poetry collection. How do you pull the poems together under the umbrella of a collection? And also, it then takes a look at how do we take these poems and how do we bring them to life for children in classrooms, in libraries, in places all over the world. And Charles and Irene are just two fabulous people to talk about that with us. I do want to add a little note here that I'll firm up later. I should mention that in addition to all of our workshops on the calendar that have poetry in the title, there's also poets at other workshops. So poetry, I think we find in every avenue of writing. It's always there. It's always at the backbone. So of course there are poets at every one of our workshops. Just to give an example, if you think of our summer camp in fiction, the word poetry is not in the title, but Leslia Newman will be one of the faculty members, and she writes novels in verse, and she writes poetic picture books, and she writes standalone poetry. David Bowles is also a faculty member at summer camp, and he writes and teaches poetry. He contributes to anthologies. He writes novels in verse. He has his own poetry collections. So you can see that if you came to summer camp, even though poetry isn't in the title, having one of them, David or Leslia, as a mentor, really, you can see how much you would be able to share with that faculty mentor in the day-to-day one-to-one sessions, and that you would be getting a lot of information about poetry, even though poetry isn't necessarily in the title. Just to talk a little bit more about things that might click that poetry mind in place would be some offerings for verse novelists. In 2020, we actually have 3 different offerings for verse novelists. The first one is a retreat. It's called Novels in Verse, Analyze and Generate, and that's with Joy McCullough. Special guests, Padma Venkatraman and Andrew Carr. And this workshop is really meant to start foundationally with breaking down what the novel in verse form is, and then offering you opportunities to generate poems as they relate to the themes that you've established in your novel in verse. You can attend this workshop if you are just beginning in this area, and you can also attend this workshop if you're heavily into a novel in verse that you're working on. I would also say you could attend this workshop if you're writing a hybrid between, maybe it's a novel that has some verse and some prose within it. This would also be a great workshop for that. We have 2 online courses launching this fall for verse novelists, and they're with Cordelia Jensen. One is our Crafting Image Systems in Your Novel in Verse, and the other is Writing Novels in Verse or Vignettes, the Advantages and Disadvantages. You can look for those offerings as well as all of our online offerings. They'll be coming to the website in February. They'll have the details and registration information there. So far, today we've covered nonfiction and poetry, and the last of the workshops we'll touch on today covers a little bit of everything. I'm going to call it our specialty offerings because they maybe don't quite fit in the vein of something else that we've talked about either on one of the past webinars or even today. We can start here with our Writing for the Educational Market. This workshop sells out quickly each year because the educational market is really hungry for content. And this workshop walks attendees from the first day through how to start in the market and then how to continue building your career in the educational market. They cover craft and also the business side of writing in the educational market. They go through topics like cover letters and sample writing packets, proposals, fiction opportunities, nonfiction opportunities, poetry opportunities, and more and more and more. I am going to read a little testimonial here. I think it really hits it for this workshop. It says, "This is a fantastic workshop. I came in not knowing at all how the educational market works, and now I know exactly what to do to find work for hire, to write my book proposals, and to work for book packagers." That's it. That's great. This is a great workshop for writers looking to expand their career. Another specialty course that we have that kind of keeps that school educational market in mind would be our writing early readers and first chapter books. These books, which are meant for readers as they move from being read to reading on their own, really requires a specific skill set for the book creator. And this workshop introduces you to all of that. There are sessions like how early readers help kids learn to read, characters, emotions, stories, and arcs for young readers, and work for hire projects or submissions. What do you choose? And that's a great question when it comes to that workshop. If you're thinking of an early reader series, is that looking for a book packager that might want you to write for them, or is that actually crafting a proposal and doing a submission on your own? And those are some of the things that are covered in that workshop. And really, here's another example. I talked a little bit about this with poetry, but thanks to student feedback, there was a wish for more. People came to that early reader and chapter books kind of as an introduction, and then they wanted a follow-up. They wanted something deeper. And so in a workshop called Developing Your Chapter Book Series. And so Debbie and Jennifer Loughran and additional faculty will all help teach the principles of crafting a series for young readers. These series that they'll be talking about, they take up the sweet spot really between early readers ending and middle grade books starting. These are layered stories in their structure, but they have to be streamlined enough for a developing reader. I think of Debbie's own Jasmine Taguchi series, which is perfect for that. Jada Jones is another terrific example, kind of moving on the higher end. One of Jen Loughran's clients, Kate Messner, her Ranger Rick series, would kind of all fit within this breadth, this area here. They can talk about how do you bring a series to market? What does that look like? And these courses, so we have the kind of introductory early readers and chapter books, and immediately following it is our Developing Your Series. They're back to back for a reason. So people could take one or people could take both, and then they could get their series kind of off and running. Also in the specialty area, we have our Creating Concept books for the very young with Selena Yoon, Rebecca Kydotlich, Denise Fleming, and creative director Patty Ann Harris. This workshop will be our first hosting for concept books, but we've had a lot of questions come to us from people who have either visited or haven't visited yet, but they're interested in knowing, can a concept book be wordless? Can you submit a concept book if you're not an illustrator? Can you use photography in concept books? Or how do you reinvent a concept that's been done 100 times, like color books or seasons? More importantly, what do you need to know about word choice to make a concept book stand out? And so these were some of the questions that kind of drove us in the description of this workshop. If concept books are something of interest to you, it's something that you'd like to learn more about, this would be a great workshop for you. I'm going to make a leap now because we were just talking about concept books, early readers, right? And we're going to go from some of our youngest readers to our teen readers. We have another specialty workshop, and it's brand new this fall. It's called Pushing the Limits, Writing Experimental Novels. And we say experimental to mean it could be novels in verse or graphic novels or vignettes, or you're doing something really interesting with form or with structure or with chronology. I think of Meredith Rousseau's Birthday, which to me, thinking about a book that's taking a sample on one day over a span of years, this is a good example of a book that would fit here. There was a definite play in the form and the chronology of that story. The way that it was structured was really important. The way that the multiple points of view worked back and forth. So this is a workshop that might intertwine genres. It might be something that somebody says, I've never seen that carried off in a book before, but and the faculty here is really going to help talk you through how do you make one of those novels that seems to be breaking rules, break in, or get to market. I'll pause here for just a second, and once again, I'm going to say that this next workshop doesn't have something in the title that might make you think it fits in kind of this specialty webinar series. But again, I'm going to look at the faculty for this one and talk a little bit about it. So I'll back up here and just say, if this were last year, one of the workshops that I would be talking about as a specialty is our graphic novel workshop. But we offer that standalone graphic novel workshop every other year. And so in 2020, it's not on the calendar as a standalone. You could see in some of the workshops that I've talked about, graphic novels fit within those workshops, like the Pushing the Limits workshop. Something else you might see is looking at the faculty themselves for those who have written or have experience with graphic novels. And so the one that comes to mind for me is our summer camp intensive in illustration, because along with talking about narrative arc and doing different medias during the day, having hands-on sessions, having one-to-one feedback with your mentor, we also have a guest editor coming to visit us. And there is a session that is specific called the Graphic Novel in Process. So the workshop itself is just this broad workshop for illustrators, but when you look specifically at some of the breakout sessions, at some of the faculty mentors, you might see that there is a place for your graphic novel within the workshops themselves. If you're interested in illustration and you want to talk more about some of these offerings, next week during our webinar that's specific to illustrators, I'll showcase a little bit more and talk a little bit more about graphic novels then as well. So there we go. In 30 minutes, we did over 20 programs and talking. That's what we'll cover today with nonfiction and poetry and kind of some of those specialty areas. And maybe you heard a workshop that you'd like to know more about. I would ask you to visit our website. On the website, you'll find very detailed descriptions, an overview of the topics that will be covered. Usually, if it's a workshop that we've had before, we'll show a former schedule so you can see detailed day-to-day what it looks like. You'll see testimonials if we've offered the workshop before or if the faculty has taught for us before. And you can find lots of other information out on the website itself. There's also a new tool at the top of the workshop page on our website, and it's a filtering tool that kind of goes through some of those questions that we asked at the beginning of the webinar. Maybe you're interested in picture books and you would click on picture books and then only the picture book offerings would show up. Or perhaps you're interested in nonfiction and you click on nonfiction and only the nonfiction offerings would show up. But I would say, remember to take a look at the fabulous faculty that we have. And if there's someone that you're looking forward to working with, that's also a way to take a look at the listings, the offerings that we have. One other thing that I wanted to share too, something that we have new going on and people are taking advantage of it, which I'm so excited to see, is our ambassador program. We have 4 wonderful ambassadors, Kat Galliano, Rona Shearden, Alex Villasante, and Joe Lloyd, who's our program assistant. The ambassadors will take a survey from you. You fill it out online and it asks some questions like those 3 questions we talked about at the top of the webinar. And they'll follow up with you with a phone call to discuss some programs that might be just right for your writing goals, just right for your needs for 2020 and really beyond. We've seen some really engaging conversations, and our ambassadors are doing such a nice job with connecting people to the professional development that they're looking for as writers and illustrators. That said, we have a team here that's doing a great job, which includes our faculty, our fabulous faculty that's helping to build these programs, our ambassadors, our hospitality team. Really everyone in here is trying to really craft some special offerings for you in 2020. So we hope that you'll come visit us and that we can find something here for you. So why don't we take some time and just go over a few questions that people might have about the 2020 offerings. And before I sign off, George, I would say, there's George Brown, our executive director. George. I would say we do have a promotion going on for the next week. I believe it ends on January 31st. It is our bucket list promotion, and that is for $100 off any retreat on campus.